Camera design in video games is a major part of what creates immersion in the story and its characters. Without good design, it can be the reason why immersion breaks for a lot of players. So, how can good camera design help us get immersed in the games that we play? Welcome back to MovesTech, where we bellow on about video games and stuff we enjoy. I'm Victor.
And I'm Tess.
Immersion is, of course, extremely subjective. What I find immersive might not be what Tess finds immersive, and there's not really a right or wrong when it comes to all of this. The two most immersive and common camera systems in games are the first-person perspective, where the camera is the player character's eyes, and the third-person perspective, where the camera is behind the player character, usually behind the right shoulder.
Since it's so subjective, there isn't really a right or wrong when it comes to camera design. Each perspective, be it first person, third person, or top down, have various ways of immersing the player in the game. First person is intended to make the player feel like the character they're playing by literally seeing the world through the character's eyes. Third person generally feels more cinematic and uses immersion in the same way that movies does, not by being the character but being with the character. However, strictly from an accessibility aspect, first person can be very disorienting to some people, similar to why VR games can make you feel sick and dizzy, although not usually to the same extremes. One way first person games try to rectify this is by including different accessibility settings, such as changing field of view, reducing camera sway, or simply adding a dot in the center of the screen. And that works similarly to focusing on the road in front of you when riding in a car to reduce motion sickness.
One big gripe that I have when it comes to camera design, that I'm pretty sure most people actually do like, is when games implement both first person and third person. The biggest ones that comes to mind are every Bethesda game, but also recently the Avatar game from Ubisoft released an update that added third person to the game. I'm not a big fan of games that design the camera this way, because I feel like neither perspective plays as well as it should. They may seem quite similar in a way, but the workload is quite different when you create a first-person game versus a third-person game. And to me, focusing on designing two different camera systems that works okay is clearly not as good as designing one system that works great, whether it be first or third person. Fallout 4 has both options, for example, seemingly working pretty okay in combat no matter the choice, but also feels like they're catering to all gameplay styles in a single game, instead of choosing to go one route and stick to it, letting the right players come to them.
Immersion in games is also not purely down to what camera angle you use. As most people, I like really good story to draw me in. A narrative that engages me as a player and makes me feel like a part of the game. Narrative, lore, and world building deepens your knowledge of the world and draws you in like the pages of a good book. The narrative options for a game can be as simple as having multiple dialogue choices. The Fallout series takes this approach, making certain options like barter, lie, or convince a strategic choice towards the playstyle of your choosing. New Vegas is probably the best example in the series, where the player can pick dialogue options that you know beforehand will fail, giving the player even more agency in playstyle. Dialogue can of course vary as well. Horizon and Mass Effect gives you various dialogue options, only pertaining to lore or information, and not necessarily furthering the plot in any meaningful way. Baldurs Gate 3 and similar titles that try to emulate tabletop RPGs usually gives the player a very wide selection of dialogue choices that lets the player react to situations with everything from malice to heroics, or even just being a smartass for the sake of it. Many games, usually AAA, often use cinematics to tell the story. It can be full-on movie scenes with performance capture that make us cry, laugh, or rage, depending on the game. Most notably are, of course, games such as The Last of Us and Red Dead Redemption 2, which are essentially movies with game elements instead of the other way around. The gameplay is secondary to the stories these games try to sell. Since these sorts of games take a lot of cues from cinema, using camera, lighting, and blocking in the same way, the immersion is similar to watching a great movie.
The most conventional method outside of pure cinematic shots is changing the camera between two people talking, referred to as shot reverse shot. Usually the character is standing in one spot and kind of idle while delivering lines. This technique is most of the time used in third-person games since shot reverse shot stems from cinema. First-person games usually do a fairly similar thing where the camera sticks to the character you're talking to, usually in a medium shot of that character. The quality can vary. Too many of these shots and it takes you out of the immersion since it can become quite repetitive. The biggest difference being that there's not really any cuts and you can't really move the camera. One notable exception to that is Cyberpunk 2077, which has the best, and I do mean the best, version of immersive dialogue. The camera isn't a static 180 flipbook, but rather a diegetic movement of your character as you experience the world of Night City. I have never come across another dialogue system that makes me feel as immersed in the characters as this. But I can go on forever about this, I'll just drop it.
There are also games that let the art direction tell the story. Inside doesn't have any dialogue at all, but tells the story of someone that is being hunted in a strange environment. The need to survive and learn more about this little boy is primary. He gets killed if you don't escape, and the environment is dark and suppressing, further enhancing the mood for the game. Why is he hunted? The same resounding questions echo while you explore the gory and strange world of Little Nightmares, where you're introduced to someone who's alone, hungry, and navigating surreal rooms and odd creatures. You get immersed in the world that unfolds as you piece things together one room at a time. In this way, the camera is often the spectator, instead of a character that you form an emotional connection to. There aren't any cinematics, but lighting and color tell us what to feel instead.
If it's not the visual immersion you're looking for, then maybe you get hooked on great sound design. It can be the bustle of a city, with honking horns while you swing around New York City as Spider-Man, the distant gunshots from fellow raiders fighting for their lives against an ark, or a friend who got lost in peak and you can only hear faint traces of a voice further down the mountain.
Oh shit! No! I was just like, vibing, dancing.
Sound can enhance your gameplay experience and in some cases even dictate it. Hi-Fi Rush, a super vibrant and fun game, makes you keep the beat to fight monsters with your guitar skills. You hit enemies to the beat, jump around the environment, and just enjoy the vibes. The game rewards you for listening and focusing on sound more than any other gameplay element. A moodier sound design is found in Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, where the game actually prompts you to use headphones for the full experience, showcasing the priority of the soundscape in the game. Eerie whispers and a cacophony of voices intermingle as you try to find your true thoughts to navigate the world and what your objective is. Your gameplay is forced to fold under the pressure of a woman experiencing psychosis after the loss of her love. One series that I think both a very unique visual style and some of the best soundtracks, not only in games but in media, are the Persona games. I can't quite put my finger on what makes those games so immersive for me, but I'm just having trouble putting down the controller. The narrative is always surprisingly mature, with themes such as assault, corruption and bullying being very prominent in every entry. This mixed with some of the best music and absolutely top tier UI design and art direction makes walking in the shoes of a Japanese teenager incredibly immersive for me.
Adding to the list of design implementations is also camera effects. It can be as simple as really good color grading for an enhanced experience. You want a cozy vibe? Go for warm firelight and earthy tones in your hues and saturation. Turn it on its head and you get a bleak, pale, blue and sad mood in your game. Other effects are messing with the camera view. Cyberpunk uses many glitch effects when your brain is overloaded and lets you see Johnny flashing in as a hologram in front of you. Of course, this works best in first person, since the immersion is for you to feel exactly what V feels. Although, side tangent, I would still argue that there should be more third-person shots in this game, other than riding your motorcycle. I didn't like gearing up my version of V in Cyberpunk aesthetics, only for me to never see it. Especially since I kept getting new clothes as well that I gave up on using. Add in a mirror or a shiny surface in the elevators at least, so I can check out my gear before heading out for the day. Okay, side rant over. Let's get back on track. Arthur in Red Dead Redemption 2 experiences a drunken night out in Valentine with Lenny, and the camera adds a distortion to the lens that amplifies with the amount of alcohol Arthur drinks. When he's the most drunk, the camera actually switches to first person, for us to experience the wobbling best, until Lenny slaps him back into the third person perspective. just in time for us to experience trying to run very fast when drunk, but it ends up in slow motion. Other uses of slow motion are also applied in Ghost of Tsushima and Yotei, when you draw your sword in a standoff. Mostly to make it cool looking when wielding a katana, but I'm not arguing against that. Camera effects add a lot to the feeling. The same goes for swinging and takedowns in Spider-Man, where the camera follows you in your lead-up and ultimate hit, rewarding your efforts of button-mashing combos with a nice wrist break. Carpal tunnel sure doesn't lend itself to immersion, but cool camera pans and aerial shots do.
Lastly, genre is also a big contributor to immersion and camera design. Horror games are almost exclusively in first person. This means jump scares are easier, you can swivel the camera around corners to look for monsters or when you're being chased. Seeing worlds full of monsters and horrors through the eyes of the protagonist someone makes it feel more real in a sense. Resident Evil Requiem is doing something interesting if you play it in third person. The character will stumble and fall over sometimes when running away from monsters, making the chase feel more realistic and cinematic. Competitive shooters also tend to be in first person. One reason might be because if you play in third person, you can look around corners using the camera instead of actually having the character physically peek their head out. Using first person forces the player to be more aware of their surroundings, which, let's be fair, is quite a big part of competitive shooters. Games with very complex combat systems, such as Sifu or the Arkham series, essentially have to be in third person to not be disorienting. And it's also rad as hell to see the player character do awesome looking combos, which would be completely lost in first person, especially when it comes to big boss battles.
But like we said before, immersion is extremely subjective and multifaceted. It can be created and destroyed as easily as having a bad or good day. We wanted to mention some of the most common immersive techniques being used, along with our thoughts and what we find immersive. We would like to know your thoughts on immersion as well. Give us cool examples of games that had inventive ways of immersing you. We really want to know. See ya!